staying, but William Farrell fella was there, a strict preacher of Reformed theology, and he coerces Calvin to stick around and do the Lord's work, not just go on to some other university and be some academic. Get your hands dirty and let's go to work. So that's the reason that Calvin stayed in Geneva, Switzerland, and over the years there was back and forth again with resistance from the Catholic Church. You have to think about Switzerland at this time being big cities with their own independent city councils or magistrates that ran things, and if you had enough friends in the city council that were of Protestant belief, then you could sway the whole city and the population believe your way, but then it would go back after elections to more Catholics and they would outvote. So it was back and forth, but eventually Calvin's Reformed magistrates kind of held out, and Geneva, Switzerland really became a theocratic city-state where Calvin's doctrines held sway, and it was very, very strict. I mean, you didn't get out of line. Again, there was no religious freedoms after the reformers got a hold of things. They were reforming the abuses of the church, the Catholic Church, and it wasn't long till they were as abusive in some ways as what they had gotten away from. But anyway, we want to spend some time this morning, and this lesson today will probably be more theological and doctrinal than any lesson I've given so far, because we've been going through history and looking at the things that were taught, but it's been more a survey of the history of things. But if we don't have a basic understanding of the tenets of Calvinism, then we're really not going to have a very good handle on everything that comes after this, because the people that settled the colonies in the United States, of which we are now fixing to celebrate 250 years of nationhood, but the people that settled this land came from mostly Calvinistic thoughts, all right? For the most part, not exclusively, but we'll see that. So let's look at Calvin's theology. John Calvin did not originate all these thoughts. He basically studied Augustine's writings from the 4th century. Augustine was a early prolific writer. We didn't study his history, and if you're interested in it, you can go back and find that on your own. But basically, Augustine was a scholar who grew up living in a worldly life, but was converted by a man named Ambrose at some university later on to Christianity. And through his previous life and in conversion, he had a lot to say about sin and predestination and God's grace. All right. And so that's where Calvin got the basis for his 5 points we say today of Calvinism. He didn't originate all of it. He just organized it. Okay, he took previous people's ideas, kind of put it all together into a system, if you will, which if you believe the first argument or the first point of it, then the following points just kind of naturally, logically fall in line, but you have to accept the first one or none of it makes sense. And Calvin's first idea that all of this stems from is that God is an omnipotent, omniscient God. In other words, He's all-powerful and He's all-knowing. He knows everything, and He has known everything since before the world began and before there was ever any of us alive. God knew what all our actions would be, all right? And that's the sovereignty of God. He is all-powerful. Every event, everything man has ever done, God knew beforehand what you would do. And the problem really is that in Calvin's mind, he couldn't understand how God, knowing what your actions would be, allowed you to have free will to make that choice. All right? You didn't have any free will at all. You were going to do everything you ever do in your life. God is sovereign and all-knowing and all-powerful, and that's just the way it is. But he couldn't understand how we can still have a choice in our life, and God still knew that we'd make that choice. See, there's a difference there. But if you accepted that, then he took Augustine's ideas of original sin, and we're going to look at some of what Augustine said back in the 4th century, nearly 1,000 years before Calvin. Augustine lived in a time when there was a monk up in Britain named Pelagius. And if you're ever accused of being a Pelagian, you won't know what that means, all right? But you'll see that in writings. And basically, Pelagius says you do have free will, and you can do enough good works to warrant salvation, all right? Humans are not born sinners. We just have bad habits, all right? Pelagius says you got a lot of bad habits, but if you want to bad enough, you can live a perfect life and do enough good works to be saved. That's Pelagianism, works salvation, if you will. Well, Augustine was totally opposed to that idea. He says, no, in Adam we all fell. The original sin of Adam became an inherent propensity built into every man. When you're born a little baby, you've got an inherent propensity to sin. It's built in within you. And you are not able not to sin. You're going to be a sinner. It's just that it's born in you. That's Augustine. And, you have an appetite for self-gratification that is driven by some inner nudge, if you will, that from that Adam sin that's in you. You just can't help yourself not to sin. All right, that's Augustine. Our free will is damaged. We only choose evil. We're not inclined to do any good. All right, your free will is damaged by this internal sin in your life from Adam. We're not free to choose. In other words, it's kind of like we've all seen the balances that's like on the justice system and today, but the weights and balances, the little arms with the weights on them that balances. In Augustine's mind, Adam's sin is on the bad side, and it's really pulling that scale down, all right? That's the bad side, and there's not enough weight you can put on the good side to ever tip the balance in favor of doing good. It's always tipped in favor of doing bad. That's Adam's original sin. So we don't possess enough good free will to tip the scales in favor of making righteous choices. It's kind of like those cartoons you see where you got a little devil on one shoulder, a little angel on the other, and they're speaking in your ear, and the devil's saying, go ahead, do it, go ahead. No, the devil always wins. That's Augustinian theology. Well, Calvin picks up on that. All right. Now, there's something more to this. Augustine said that original sin has so broken our will to do anything good, we must have God's grace to repair our broken will so that we can truly desire to do any good, okay? God has to act, all right? And the quote he would put in his book was, the heart of stone is removed and a heart of flesh is put in. All right, and I think you can read, and I didn't look it up, in Jeremiah, isn't it, about the heart of stone? It's an Old Testament passage. It talks about having a heart of stone being made into a heart of flesh. It's there. Nonetheless, think about this. The heart of stone is removed and a heart of flesh is put in. What part did you play in that? Zero. You are totally passive. God does that. All right. So, to regenerate our spirit requires God to act first, not you. That's the real difference. And God acts first. We don't have it. We're totally depraved. We're dead in sin. We don't have any ability to do anything good. We can't accept the gospel until God regenerates your spirit. And that's where a direct operation of the Holy Spirit in sanctification and conversion comes in. Keep them ideas in your head. God's Spirit has to come into you somehow and do something to your damaged will and your, degenerate heart and remove that. And you're passive. You can't play any part in that. All right.
Ezekiel 36:26. Ezekiel 36:26. That verse.
Ephesians?
Ezekiel.
Ezekiel. Thank you. Thank you. About the heart of stone and the heart of flesh. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so that in a nutshell is Augustine, what he wrote in the 4th century. So here comes John Calvin reading this, and he takes these original sin and total depravity that man cannot by his own will choose to believe and obey the gospel. The theory all boils down to the question of, in salvation, who acts first, God or man? And Calvin said, God acts first. Okay. If you keep that in your mind, God has to act first. It makes this a little more. It doesn't make any sense to me or probably most of you, but that's the theology. Okay. God has to make the first move. All right. Then, if you believe that, then God in his sovereignty, who knows everything, he knows who is going to be chosen to salvation and who is not going to be chosen. And those are the elect, those that are chosen in Calvin's theology. Only the elect are predestined to salvation. All right? So let's say you believe that, but you hadn't been saved yet. Are you one of the elect? Are you one of the elect? Are you one of the... You don't know. Who is God going to choose? We're all sinners, but who among us is God chosen? Who is he not? You don't know. Well, how do you find that out? Well, that's why and still to this day you hear it. Your conversion experience has a lot to do with this. How do you know you're saved? Did you have some vision? Did you have a dream at night and saw some, did you have some miraculous event? You should have been dead, but God's pulled you out of the, sinking ship, or, conversion experiences. You got to relate your experience, and that tells everybody else around you, yeah, God, you're an elect person. God chose you. That becomes a big thing, all right? And you still hear people today that, claim to have had some dream or some vision or heard God talking to them in a small voice in the night, or all kinds of things. But we'll not get any further into that. But then Calvin said that, yes, Christ died for everyone, but his atonement isn't effective for everyone. It's only effective for the elect. Christ's blood doesn't save the depraved person from his sin. He only saves the elect from their sins. That's the limited atonement part of it. All right? And if God has chosen you to be one of the elect, you can't resist God's grace. You're going to be saved, whether you want to or not. You can go to the, kicking and screaming. But if God says you're one of the elect, you're going to be saved. Well, you can't resist that. All right? Irresistible grace. If you think about it, you're one of the chosen ones, but you're depraved, you're dead. What can a dead person do to resist? Nothing. They're dead. But they're regenerated by this direct operation of the Spirit, and now they've got this heart of flesh, and then God saves them, and you have no power to resist that. And if God puts all this effort into saving the elect, it's for sure that they will all persevere into salvation. You can never fall away if you're really saved. Okay. Comments? I'm not going to say questions because we don't want to spend all next month talking about them. But anyway, does that sort of make sense?
This is not a biblical perspective.
No.
The book of Acts, you don't see that anywhere.
No.
In the conversion, never a measuring stick.
No.
Never experience.
No.
So you have to depend on these scholars, these people.
Yeah.
Because world and fall into that.
It's, yeah. The tentacles of Calvinism are everywhere, including in some churches of Christ today. You got to look out for it because it slips in. You're never, well, I say never, you're not going to see many even denominations today that are strictly all 5 points of Calvinism all the way. They might take one or two of them, a little bit of a third one, and we'll see that in just a second. We're not going to get into that right now. But the idea being, I lost my mind there just for a second.
You know, they not only taught it, but it became punitive if you didn't believe it.
Oh yeah,
You know, they
oh yeah,
people off and disfellowship them
yeah.
if you didn't accept what these teachers were teaching.
And yeah,
And so that eventually, you know, cow people into saying, okay, I've got to come up with some example of when the Lord appeared to me. And I will talk to you, I will say.
yeah.
But it's a big flaw. You don't fit into the category that so you're not among the saved.
Yeah. And we'll see example after example of how this theology infiltrated many, many, many other denominations that are going to start appearing, and those that even came across on the Mayflower to the colonies brought it with them. All right, we're going to see how that all spread.
And in the essence of, if the first part's wrong and the rest of his theory is wrong.
Yeah.
It also makes him, when the first one is proven wrong, and, you know, people die, then he has to come up with these lies to try to change it to make it fit in. And so it's one
Yeah.
on top of another on top of another.
Yeah.
To do it, reverse part of that.
And I just came up with a thought I had in my head that I went out. The book that Calvin wrote that lays all this out in about 1536, The Institutes of the Christian Religion. He was a young man when he wrote all this. I mean, he's in his late 20s, I think. The book has got more words in it than this does. It's a big old, I don't remember, 500, 600 page book. The Institutes of the Christian. And in my mind, if it takes somebody more paper and ink to explain their theory than the New Testament's got in it, it's probably wrong. Okay? And that's just my little pea brain way of thinking of things. But if it takes you that much effort and pen and ink to explain away the New Testament, then you've probably gotten off track. And that is true of so many of them books over there in the library. All right? If a commentary on the book of James, which is 5 short chapters, is 250 pages long, there's a good chance that somewhere in there the guy got off track somewhere. Just that's my mentality, right or wrong. It's just the way I think. Because if you get back to this, yeah, you might need a little help understanding some of the original languages and stuff, but it's not that deep and difficult to understand. All right. It takes a lot of help to misunderstand, and there's been plenty of writers providing that help. All right. Okay. So John Calvin dies in 1546, but of course his theology has followers. One of the more important ones, a man by the name of Theodore Beza, that's in Geneva. And there is a theological academy started at the university there that keeps Calvinism aflame. It's going strong and spreading everywhere during this time. All right. Now think about what year we're talking about here, the 1530s and 1540s. And so when we switch gears, if we get there this far, to the English, over in England, the Reformation, what happened there, it's during these same years. All right. So we'll keep that in the back of your mind. So Calvinism is the hot topic of the times. It sweeps throughout Europe as Presbyterianism, which that church is still around, although it's really fallen on hard times in the United States in the last decade or so. Membership fallen precipitously. But presbyter. That's a good Greek word, is it not? What does it mean? An elder, an older person, presby, meaning older. And that's the form of government. The Presbyterians throughout the Pope and all the archbishops and all that hierarchy, but the church was run by elders. That's good enough, but they didn't stop there. The elders would get together in their synods and meet together and decide on church policy and doctrines. So that's Presbyterian organization, elders and synods, not popes and councils. All right? So Presbyterian, and it's a whole other study. We're not going to get into John Knox, but Presbyterian becomes the Church of Scotland by this. And John Knox is a very interesting person who survived. Oh, I can't remember all the details. He was condemned and put on a slave. He was one of them slave galley rowing a ship for years. You know, they sent you there to row this galley till you died, and then they put another one in your place. Well, John Knox just didn't die. And he wound up escaping that and became the one that led Scotland into the Reformed movement and was the Church of Scotland became a major Presbyterian force. So you can read about John Knox if you care to. But the Presbyterianism also moves north up into the Netherlands. And we won't get into a big history of the Netherlands, but suffice it to say that they were also divided into a whole bunch of provinces with their little local lords and nobles that led them, and they get into a civil war, mostly over this Reformation, and winds up in the Netherlands that the country divides north and south, just like our Civil War, and the 10 southern states remain Catholic, and the 7 northern states become Reformed, Calvinistic states. All right? And you can read about this man up in the north named William of Orange, if you care to, who a Jesuit priest slipped in with a pistol and assassinated him in a hotel. And the bullet holes are still in the wall to this day in that hotel. I mean, he caught him coming down their stairs, and but that's if the interesting history, if you care to read it, you can read about during this time, this assassination of one of the reformers up there. Okay, then let's move to a man named Jacob Arminius. Now, like Pelagius and Pelagianism, we talked about him at Salvation by Works Month. Some people today will accuse you of being Arminian. Okay, and I'll take that banner up to a point. Well, what was Arminius known for? Well, he was a student of that Theodore Beza guy down there in Geneva at the University of Leiden in about 1580. And when he graduates from university, he returns to the Netherlands and becomes a pastor up there. And over his years of preaching, he starts having some serious doubts about strict Calvinism, especially when he's teaching on some of the passages in Romans chapter 7 and chapter 8. We won't study those passages, but the ones I'm referring to, if I can find the book of Romans here, that he would be studying. And of course, Calvin had this in his book of the Institutes, had it all wrong. Chapter 7, I thought I could look right about verse 5. Romans 7, verse 5. For when we were in the flesh, the motions of sins which were by the law did work in our members to bring forth fruit unto death. But now we are delivered from the law, that being dead wherein we were held, that we should serve in newness of spirit and not in the oldness of the letter. I mean, they would look at that and get it all messed up as what that's teaching and say that that's that original sin that's got you bound and held down, and till you're released by the Spirit, you have no hope of salvation. So he would read that and said, Calvin, I'm kind of having some doubts about that. And then over in, of course, chapter 8, you have verse 29 and following there. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called, and whom he called, them he also justified, and whom he justified, them he also glorified. So those verses give people to this day a lot of problems. If you've already got your mind twisted that you believe Calvin's doctrines of predestination and total depravity, you can see how a person could be reading into these passages Calvinism, but it's not there. And I say, if you don't see how it's not there, that's another lesson for another time. But the predestination is not of the individual, but of the plan, the predetermined plan that Christ would be the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Okay, that's a clue if you want to study that. All right. Anyway, Arminius returns to Leiden as a professor of theology in 1603, and in some of the other strictly Presbyterian Calvinistic faculty starts hearing some of this stuff he's saying and thinks, Arminius is probably a wolf in sheep's clothing here, and start having some pretty strong debates with him about this. And as is even true today, when you start having a debate but you can't win the argument, what do? You go after the person. So they accuse Arminius of being Pelagian, okay, and a Catholic, probably. Catholics believing in salvation by the good works you do. And of course, works, we know from Luther, has nothing to do with it. It's by faith alone, through grace alone, okay, and Calvin would agree with that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so Arminius is in failing health, and before they hash all these differences out, he dies in 1609. But up in the Netherlands, where he preached for many years, a lot of his adherents to his beliefs began what's known as a remonstrance movement. All right? If you are in a remonstrance movement, that means you are in opposition. You are, there went another one of those words. This went right out of the back of my head. You oppose, it left me. You get the idea. We don't use the word remonstrance. It means you're vigorously defending your beliefs in opposition to what the standard is. So this movement gets a head of steam up in the Netherlands. We won't go into the Council of Dort that met, and in that council, though, the Calvinists went out, and that's really where the 5 points of Calvinism actually come from, is this Council of Dort that says all these in the Remonstrant movement are wrong. They're the ones that really lay Calvin's theology, that big thick book, into those 5 points that we talk about. Total depravity, unlimited grace, unlimited. I can't even do them. What's unlimited? Limited atonement, irresistible grace, perseverance of the saints. What's the U? Unlimited election. There you go. That's the tulip. Well, Calvin didn't ever use the acrostic tulip. That's English for one, and he's French, all right? He didn't speak English. But the council up there in this remonstrance movement that kind of took care of that, that's where that came from. Okay, well, what did Arminius teach that was so troubling to the Reformed theology of the Calvinists? Primary issue that Arminius had with all this Calvinism was it makes God the author of sin. Now, we can't have that, can we? God, the author of sin? Well, how, Arminius? How is he the author of sin? Well, if God chooses some, he saves only the elect, and they would definitely say that's true. Well, if that's true, and we have no choice in our salvation at all, we're totally depraved and unable, we're passive. All right, so God chooses you, and you have no choice in the matter of your own salvation, then God is morally wrong when he punishes sinners. That's Arminius's. Exactly, yeah. I'm having a lot of them mental slip-ups this morning. I didn't take my smart pills this week. I'm sorry.
but I didn't know.
So,
I could tell how you were getting into that, that's what it was doing. when you
Yeah.
picked that word, right?
well, I'm trying to go through all this theology in this lesson so that, like I said, when we start studying what came to our shores, you understand what they believed, because they were strict in this. But Arminius says God is not the author of sin. If he chooses some and not others, and you have no choice, then it'd be morally wrong for God to punish a sinner, because he had no choice. And he's right. That's really what's so hideous about Calvinism's theology. It's like chaining you up to a tree over there, and you've been starving for a week, and he puts a big hot meal just out of reach of you, and you can't get any of it. That's Calvinism in its strictest form. All right? Anyway, now Arminius said man is fallen. He is in sin at birth, but he's not 100% dead in his sins. All right? He's fallen, but he's not completely dead. See, Arminius is kind of like Calvinism light. All right? He's not fully gung-ho on it. And that's really what he was. He had doubts. God does elect, but he doesn't elect the individuals. Well, I would agree with that. And I don't know what Arminius really meant by all that, but I would agree with that, what I know of it. God gives you just enough grace. You're kind of halfway elected, all right? You've got enough ability so that you can see and hear the gospel, and we're free to choose and accept the gospel, or we're free to reject it. But man's will is not dead. It's just weak and feeble. All right? So you see the difference? Calvin would say, no, it's totally 100% dead, unable to do anything. Arminius says, well, no, it's weak, but if you try hard enough, you can pick yourselves up by your own bootstraps and do this. All right? Which now you can see why he was accused of being Pelagian, because that's kind of what Pelagius said. No, you've got the ability. If you want to, you can choose to do good. All right? So Arminius would say that yes, man can resist God's grace, and yes, man can leave the faith after truly being saved. There's no perseverance of the saints. All right. Of course, as we've talked about, we'll briefly look on the Reformed theology side. You know, God is 100% sovereign. He moves first. Man is dead. He's unable to choose good. This inherited Adam's sin, the guilt of that sin causes total depravity. Only those that are regenerated by God are given grace to hear the gospel. And that's where that direct operation of the Holy Spirit in sanctification, setting you apart to holy service. You can't do that on your own. You have to have regeneration through the Holy Spirit. It's the only way. That's Calvinism. And so, and we're getting way over ahead of ourselves, but when you hear about some of the early Restoration Movement preachers encountering, an altar. You know what an altar call is, or a mourner's bench? Those we don't know, but that would be where you hear a stirring sermon about salvation, and you really want to obey the gospel, but you don't know if you're going to be chosen tonight or not. So you'd come forward, and they talk about that being an altar call. You'd come up to the front to the altar, and there'd be a bench you could try to pray through, hoping that God is going to send you that experience tonight that means, yes, you're elect and you're saved. See, that's the mentality of these people. And that was very prevalent in the colonies of the United States. That's where it came from. So this regeneration, this getting that experience, that call, that conversion experience we're talking about. See, that all falls in together. And many of y'all are not old enough, but I was a young boy, the 60s, 9 or 10 years old, and I did hear Marshall Keeble preach in Poplar Bluff, Missouri at a tent meeting. And I don't remember a whole lot about that, except I do remember this. He was talking about the 3,000 being converted at the day of Pentecost, and he was he had a sense of humor about him. And he said, that must have been the longest mourner's bench in history. And I was just 9 or 10, but I've never forgotten Marshall Keeble saying about the longest mourner's bench in history was on the day of Pentecost. If there was 3,000 got the call, there must have been a lot of them came forward. Anyway, it's not funny, but it is funny. Okay. Any comments about Calvinism? One more point about the once saved, always saved. Calvin would say those called by God can never fall away. Yeah, but Mr. Calvin, what about this so-and-so that did fall away? Well, he never was truly saved anyway. He appeared to be saved for a while, but he was a hypocrite. He was just fooling you. He wasn't really an elect. He wasn't really saved. He just had you going for a while. That's their comeback all the time. So if you're truly elect, you'll never be lost. But those that do fall away, well, they were just fooling you. They weren't really saved ever. Okay. A lot of problems with that, but it still persists. Where are you going to find those kind of things today? Well, John Wesley, that was the founder of Methodism, he was Arminian. He believed you had a little bit of ability to do some good works and accept the gospel. But when you hear the once saved, always saved, you're definitely hearing Calvinism today. You drive down the road and you see a Free Will Baptist sign. What does free will sound like to you? Does that sound like Calvin, or does that sound like Arminius? Yeah, they took on a little bit of the Arminian flavor of it, see? The Free Will Baptist means, yeah, we don't accept that you don't have any choice no matter whatsoever and all that, but you have a little bit of ability to choose. What about missionary Baptists? What would they be? Well, if you believe that everybody that's depraved and dead in sin cannot respond to the gospel at all, then why go on a missionary trip to try to convert them? It's not going to be successful. And you think about that. You're either saved or you're not. You're elect or you're not. Why preach the gospel to everybody? They're going to be saved or they're not, whether you preach to them or not, because that's God's sovereign will. So missionary Baptists believe in doing mission work. So they're Arminian. They believe it can do some good to preach. All right? Primitive Baptists, they're the strict Calvinists, the strictest of all of them. All right? And big on conversion experiences. Okay. We've only got about 5 minutes now, but I've kind of got through what I really hope to. Any comments before we'll take a few minutes and proceed with English, but any comments? Clear as mud? Yeah.
When people weren't necessarily studying themselves, they call it individual. It's just whoever was proper at the time wrote the most.
Yeah.
Articulate the most, and they had a great situation. It wasn't until people were individually encouraged to study.
Yeah.
What it says, you read it, see if it says it or not, and people got sorting that out themselves. You can see how entrenched that can become. And that was still Peter did Paul in mind. You were.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're going to see a lot of that coming here. Personal side note. I pulled a copy of the Institutes of the Christian Religion. Like I say, there's a book about that wide off the shelf one day. What's this all about? And I mean, I'd read a paragraph here, and it don't make a lot of sense. Read a paragraph. I mean, after about 10 minutes of looking and reading and perusing through that thing, I had a headache. All right, this stuff he's using some concepts and some stuff I mean, the guy was very well educated and smart, but I guess if it takes that much education to understand it, it probably isn't right in the first place. I mean, I'd say that tongue in cheek, but Yeah, it gave me a headache to try to read through that. And what in the world is he talking about? Where'd you come up with that idea? It's just nuts. But,
Well, you see that even in the book of Acts, Paul was a very educated man,
oh yeah,
educated in the Jewish religion and things that went with that, and he's very prejudicial to the church. It wasn't until, that he really had that encounter with the Lord and instructed in the teaching of the gospel, and his teaching is entirely different.
mm-hmm,
Just let the Lord speak through him, rather than him telling you what to do. And I think you see these people writing these great books. It does give you a headache because you're listening to them rather than listening to what the Lord has.
yeah. And then Paul had that run in Athens on Mars Hill with all those Greek philosophers. Boy, you talk about some educated people and all that old Greek philosophy of Plato and Aristotle and Socrates and dualism of humanity and all this stuff. That's deep. I'm not a Greek philosopher, but Paul kind of handed it right back to him in a few short verses there. He had them straightened out real quick on the unknown God, and in him we live and move and have our being. All right. Which, by the way, that's some of Tyndale's translation of the scriptures. In him we live and move and have our being. I mean, Tyndale gave the Bible its flow. It's in English. That's who is responsible for that. We'll start Wednesday night with the English Reformation, and I will make the first little statement here. It would be a gross oversimplification, and many do this, of what went on in England and the establishment of the Anglican Church by stating it was only due to Henry VIII wanting a divorce from Catherine of Aragon and the Pope refusing to grant it to him. I mean, yes, that played a role in it, but it's an oversimplification to say that's the only thing that caused it, because there'd been things going on in England for centuries that had primed them to be ready for this move. All right, we talked about Wycliffe translating the scriptures into English, and Wycliffe was very much opposed to Catholic over the Pope and the archbishops and their ruling. And you got to remember too that the church had their hand out, and it wasn't asking nice. It was fill it up with cash, kings and countries, taxing people, taxing the monarchs. All right, the money was flowing in. All right, and most countries and kings didn't like being told what to do like that. All right. So Wednesday, Lord willing, we'll discuss the English Reformation and all the stuff you never wanted to know about all the kings and queens of England. But if you don't know about them, you don't understand how this developed. Thank you for your attention.